The American James White for those interested of which he said it came into being in order to provide Scottish writers with such a Grasset Gibbon, Edwin and Willem Muir, and Francis George Scott, amongst others. Many of of Scottish outlook, seeing an independent Scotland as an outward-looking member of the international community. For White, nationalism did not mean parochialism. On the other hand, writing in the modern Scot, he politically, White's writings espoused a pluralist Scottish nationalism. Robert Crawford has summed up the legacy of It was Barrow's class that really quickened his imagination, and that did most to strengthen political convictions first nurtured in Alec's boyhood. It was Barrow's highlighting of the Scottish concept of the community of the realm as one of the earliest written constitutional articulations of the modern concept of nationhood in Europe that particularly impressed itself upon the future First Minister of Scotland as a student in St Andrews. So to bring things full circle to the purpose of this evening, in this building in St Andrews, which once housed the Scottish Parliament of an independent Scotland, I'd like to conclude with this insightful paragraph from Robert Crawford's book, Bannockburns. And he says, Alec Salmond realises that present-day arguments around Scottish independence are likely to be dominated by economics rather than by medieval history or legacies from Scottish literature. But independence is more than a matter of money, and there is a vestigial, discernible thread connecting the ideals of White's, the modern Scot, and the difficult Scots inheritance of MacDermid with Salmond's study of Bruce, Bannockburn, and the Declaration of Arbroath. In St Andrews, almost 4 decades after James White had left, Alec Salmond began to develop into the most important and consciously pluralist leader in the modern history of Scottish nationalism, as well as, from the perspective of the Unionist government in Westminster, the most difficult of modern Scots. Ladies and gentlemen, former First Minister of Scotland, leader of the Alpa Party, and former student of Geoffrey, Community of the Realm Barrow, Alec Salmond.
Well, in point of fact, my next task was supposed to be to introduce the gentleman on my left, and I cannot imagine a gathering where anybody would need less introduction than the gentleman on my left. So I'm going to be a little cheeky, and I'm going to take the opportunity to do something else, to say something that I think probably every person in this room would like to say. And that is, just over 2 years ago, I thought it was over. To be honest, and when it came to something I had supported and looked for and hoped for my whole life, I was on my knees. I think a lot of people were. And then the Alba Party came along. And you came back. And hope came back. And that's no exaggeration. For thousands upon thousands of people, hope was born again that day. And there have been lots of times when I have felt, what's the point? And oh my gosh, we're up against so much. I'm sure everybody has felt that. But something else, every time I have, and I've thought, you know what, why am I whining? Look what this man came through and got back up and came back to lead a genuine campaign for Scottish freedom. And if he can do that, then so can I, with my little bit of suffering and my little bit of pain. I can get back up. So, thanks to you, many of us got back up. And there is a campaign that I'm part of, and a lot of you know something about it, which has to do with the Scottish Constitution. And that claim of right that Alex has said we must proclaim far and wide. That wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the heart, and I wouldn't have had the faith to start doing that, to push and push at that, if it hadn't been. That hope came back. So, from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of everybody who feels that way, and I'm pretty sure that's everyone in this room, I want to say two things. One is thank you, and the other is that it is pretty clear that Scotland does not, especially right now, Scotland does not need Alex Salmond the way that she used to. Scotland needs Alex Salmond now more than she ever has. So, ladies and gentlemen,
some microphone adjustments going on. Can I thank you both for these wonderful double introductions? Not a single introduction, only a double introduction would do. As was said, and the history was marvellous, incidentally, and very, 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 very thoughtful and important. My memories of this place, incidentally, when I did, incidentally, there was one big inaccuracy when you said in 1973 I came to study at this university. Study was maybe a wee bit exaggeration. but nonetheless, I managed to fumble my way through it. And it is true that I found Geoffrey Barrow's classes the ones I liked the most. In fact, they were the only ones I attended at this university. But Geoffrey Barrow was an amazing man. And everything you said about it was true. But anyway, I came into this, I gave actually probably my first political speech in this Parliament Hall. I was sitting there, approximately where Dave Llewellyn is sitting at the moment. I don't know if there's any importance to that, but nonetheless it's true. The year was roughly 1975, 76, something like that. And right where I'm standing was the great new hope of Scottish conservatism, the young member of Parliament from Edinburgh Pentlands, Malcolm Ruffin. Malcolm Ruffin, with his wonderful flow and advocate's eloquence, was saying, and he said that the Conservative Party were intent on removing this dreadful Labour government, and Scotland would have its full place as a partner in the United Kingdom. Some lines never changed, did they? And of course we were in Parliament Hall, he said. And therefore we must recognise the authority of Parliament. And I, as a young lad, grew up, and I said to Malcolm, I said, but recently didn't Michael Heseltine take the authority of Parliament Parliament, the Masons swing over his head. And this was a bit of a blow to Malcolm, who had to explain that this was just a bit of exuberance from Michael Heseltine. And it didn't actually say that about Ron Brown when he did the same thing a few years later. He was saying down. But anyway, Michael Heseltine went on to great things. And so I was quite pleased with my intervention, in my first ever political intervention, and I had bullseye, the great hope of Scottish conservatism. Then Malcolm went on, he said, he really resented the fact. He resented the fact that the SNP claimed to be the sole representatives of the people of Scotland. I got again, all full of confidence, and I said, well, perhaps the SNP not the sole representative of Scotland, but we do represent the people of Scotland's soul. Because I thought that was really clever. And I remember Rifkin looked at me and said, good job, you don't believe in an afterlife, son. The moral of that story? Moral of that story is you should never ask a question unless you know what the answer is going to be. Something that our First Minister might bear in mind as she goes to the Supreme Court. Because, see, I don't know if Lord Hodge at Watson's or Lord Reid at when Hammond, that's the right way around, ever got the same breadth of vision of Scottish history as I got from Geoffrey Barrow, but somehow I doubt it very much. And Dorothy Day, for example, a wonderful, estimable advocate, the Lord Advocate, doesn't actually have sufficient confidence in the case to take it to the Scottish Parliament. Case to the Middlesex Guildhall, where the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, the appointed judges sit, 2 minutes walk from the Palace of Westminster. You see, you referenced Robert the Bruce and the community of the realm. And the importance of the community of the realm, as talked about by Geoffrey Barrow all these years ago, is at a time of national crisis in Scotland, with the King absent, and then swearing fealty to Edward I, John Bailey, with the Scotland largely deserted by its nobles, aristocracy, and judges, no doubt, that they had to have innovation. They had to have a constitutional innovation to give authority and dignity to the people they wanted to represent the country and the nation, and hence the idea of the community of the realm is born. Because the importance of the community of the realm, if you read the Declaration of Arbroath, what it says is the nobles, the prelates, the nobles, the barons, and the whole community of the realm. By definition, they weren't looking at the normal caste list of the feudal era. They were looking at something beyond that, otherwise they wouldn't have had to mention it. It was the innovation in order to justify a move to protect Scottish nationhood by overthrowing the established order. The last thing that the Scotland of the late 13th and early 14th century were going to repeat, it was to go for an adjudication on Scottish sovereignty or kingship to Edward I, which they tried in the 1290s, and they got John Bailey. It's a rather parallel to go into the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom this year. The answer to Scotland's search for the assertion of sovereignty doesn't lie in the Middlesex Guildhall. It lies in the Scottish Parliament. exercise their mandate. That's where it lies. And the innovations that are required, whatever they may be, must be sourced on that mandate and on these people. It's not a responsibility that can be shuffled off. It's a responsibility that has to be embraced, and people can think, regardless of what happens, to those members of the Scottish Parliament who decide to represent their constituents might come down. They'll be a lot better off than they were in the 1290s and 1300s, and actually, incidentally, a lot better off in Parliament that met in 1645. They were on the way to hanging the Marquis of Montrose's key supporters. So whatever dreadful things might happen to those people elected by the Scottish nation to represent their interests, they can be sure that nothing as dreadful would happen as would happen in the medieval era or the early modern era. All they have to do and to make life difficult for Westminster. I said in the introduction earlier on, it's really important, very, very important, that we don't rely on the case for Scottish independence. I saw somebody tweeting today attacking an article I'd written in the Hollywood magazine when I was saying, look, you don't rest your case on Boris Johnson for Scottish independence, because when Boris Johnson departs, that might give you a difficulty. So you might be in a situation and a wee nagging voice among Scottish nationalists saying, oh my goodness, we've lost our great proving sergeant. You don't rest the case on any single Westminster Tory politician. Now, I should say that the Westminster Conservative Party are perfectly capable of putting in somebody even less suitable than Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. I mean, unerringly, the Conservative Party, and incidentally, the Conservative Party, Parliamentary Party in Westminster, has some able, intelligent, principled people, compassionate people. They just have no chance of ever getting elected. Because the Conservative Party always chooses people who are manifestly unfit to be Prime Minister. That's what they always do. They've been doing it for the last 30, 40 years. No, Rishi Sunak, for example, now, he makes Boris Johnson look like a bleeding heart liberal. He's a hard, right ideologue. So it might well be we get in somebody even worse than Boris Johnson. He'll be an even bigger recruiting sergeant for Scottish independence. But the case of the cause of independence shouldn't depend on what's happening at Westminster. It's what we do. It's how we articulate our case. It's the actions we take and the presentation of the new case for Scottish independence, as, for example, contained in the wee Parliament book. That's what's going to positively excite the country, as opposed to saying it's either Boris Johnson or independence. It's independence for the reasons here stated. Brings to what we do at the present moment. I've been saying for some time in these meetings, I said, look, we're in a situation where Boris Johnson Johnson as Prime Minister, where Westminster has never been weakened. But that's still the situation, and it'll still be the situation in 3-4 months' time when his successor is elected. We're not up against the might of Imperial Britain. We're not even up against David Cameron and George Osborne. And they're political giants compared to what's at the head of the Tory party at the present moment. Over the next 3-4 months will be a total vacuum. To my way of thinking, that's exactly the moment to strike, when your opponents are weak. People say, well, I've asked for a Section 30. It was asked for in the terms which saw it as inevitable that Johnson was going to say no. And of course it was inevitable that he was going to say no, but why take no for an answer? Do you think anything really worth getting in politics or in life for that matter is given and majorly ask for it or request it? Of course not. What you have to do then is to mobilise a campaign in order to progress that case. So what kind of campaign might you mobilise? Well, let's talk about the Westminster Parliament for a start. There are two Alpha MPs, Neil Handay, the other Castro. I've got 45 SNP MPs. They're in my 25 years or so in the House of Commons. Well, I would give my eye teeth to have a dozen MPs. Well, if you cast your mind back to the 1990s, you might remember myself and Mr. Sullers played a bit of Parnell with Westminster, and it was pretty effective in terms of dramatically illustrating Scotland's case. It got huge publicity. It gave people the indication that perhaps the SNP wouldn't be like the feeble 50 of Labour MPs who were sitting for Scottish constituencies at that moment. If we had 45 of us sitting there, then by reading the rule book, by not allowing ourselves to kowtow to the conventions of the House, then we could have brought Westminster to a standstill on a regular basis, even more regularly than we did. That's exactly what we should be doing. Not because we like, but because if a country elects a parliament in order to have a referendum on independence, and another country says, no, you're not getting it, you're not just meant to sit back and say, well, that's a disappointment. What you do is do something about it. That's your mandate, that's your instruction, that's what you're meant to do. You make yourself so much of a nuisance that they'll be pleased to see the back of you. Back it up by popular demonstration, peaceful, popular demonstration in Scotland. You might back it up with diplomatic initiatives. I mean, one of the things about the UK at the present moment, which will be a feature in the Tory leadership contest, is that some Tories are rather queasy about the prospect of breaking international law and the fact that they like some anymore. That's an exciting the right time to be making diplomatic initiatives, saying we're having exactly the same trouble with that bunch of charlatans. Exactly the same trouble. Back in 2014, I mean, I did my best for the European Commission, but I had a kind of problem. My problem was that the United Kingdom was a loyal member of the European Union, and therefore, whatever sympathy there was for Scotland, and there was a great deal, the institutions of the Union would rally behind its member state. That is no longer the perilous state economically.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a student of economics at this university, they invented the word stagflation. An economic term, I never thought I would see it again. What's stagflation? Well, stagflation is the combination of a stagnant economy and inflation. Now, lots of countries around the world have inflation at the present moment. Lots of countries. Although the UK is worse than just about everywhere else. But lots of countries have inflation. Of course they do, because of resource prices, because of wars, because of the aftermath of the pandemic. The UK alone is having the inflationary pressures and the stagnant, flatlining economy, with the sole exception of Northern Ireland, incidentally, I've got more later. And therefore, this is a weak state, without allies, and in its having a crisis of confidence in its own structures. Exactly the time to progress the case and progress it with vigour, and exactly the time where it is indefensible to sit down and say, my role as an SNP MP is to get asked a question occasionally and to get our position at Prime Minister's questions. That is pathetic. That might mean a role that you pursue when you've got. It's not the role you pursue when you virtually represent every constituency in the land. People expect to see parliamentary interventions to the cause of national self-determination. And that, and then, you know, I looked at some SNP people joining in the don't wait 3 months, because if it actually matters, if it goes down in 3 months' time, that doesn't matter. One says, what an opportunity over the next 3 months in this power vacuum at Westminster to press home Scotland's case. Don't take no for an answer. Marshal the people who are waiting to be led, and have MPs who will be actively progressing Scotland's case as opposed to bowing down to the authority of the Westminster Parliament. In the words of Winnie Ewing, nationalist MPs are not sent to Westminster to settle down, but to settle up. To settle up for Scotland. I should probably gather from my remarks so far, I don't regard going to the Supreme Court as a particularly good strategy. In fact, I called it a Hail Mary. It's not even that. I mean, a Hail Mary pass is where you get, 1 in 10 chance of it coming off. It's like, I don't know, 1 in 100. It's not impossible, but it is. Go hear the case and then box that in. That's it closed off, not for that case, but for all time.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, leaving that question open was extremely useful to me back in the day when David Cameron, if he turned down the Section 30, then my next move was for the Scottish Parliament to have our own referendum. As long as that's open, it's a perceived threat. Once you close it off, you close it off. And it doesn't seem to be a particularly enlightened move to make. And therefore, I would advise not building up people's expectations on the pronouncement of the Which brings me to point 3 in the strategy that was unveiled by Nicholas Sturgeon recently, which is to have a plebiscite election. Now, I think there's merit in that idea. I thought there was merit in it when Angus MacNeil and now, but if you find a plebiscite election, it has to be fundamentally different from a normal election. Usual sway of party politics.
Yeah.
And if you're the usual sway of party politics, and particularly if you set as your target a majority of votes, not just seats, which is the traditional. But if you win a landslide, you get 49% of the vote, is that defeat? But if you're actually trying to leap over that self-imposed high hurdle, if you fight it as the SNP, then of course the whole SNP domestic record comes into play as part of the election campaign. We were in a good position in one way in 2014, that not even our opponents at that stage didn't question the competence of the Scottish Government or our ability to run the show in it. That is now very much open to question. It's not all the government's fault, incidentally. The unionist press are on their case. It would be less than honest not to say there's some truth in it. And it would be less than honest not to realise that we're in hard economic times, which are getting harder. Not to fight an independence plebiscite election on the SNP's domestic record, but to fight it on the case and the cause of Scottish independence. Is to fight it as Scotland United. I saw a brilliant article actually from Tasmina and Sheikh in the National this Wednesday, I think it was, which looked at the 1918 election. There are a number of lessons from the 1918 election, not least of which is the tactic of abstentionism, of setting shop up in the Doyle. Of course, there are many lessons from Irish history we would not. Constitutional means, that's the nature of Scotland, the nature of the national movement of Scotland. Doesn't make us unique in the world, but it's something we should prize and keep precious to us. But as an essential strategy, abstentionism worked in Ireland in 19, and they took that strategy and replaced the Irish Parliamentary Party, which had been dominant for the previous 40 years, swept aside in a single election. Because people eventually said, look, we want people who mean it when they say we're going to establish a free Ireland. That's one lesson. But the lesson that Tasmina looked at was actually another lesson. And that's how Lloyd George, politician of his in terms of particular of his own survival as Prime Minister, which was very much in his mind, developed the idea of a coupon, where people stood in behalf of the coalition government because he couldn't carry the Liberal Party, as Tories with a coupon, Liberals with a coupon, even Labour politicians with a coupon, and established the means by which you could divide parties in a single coalition. In other words, we could fight if the Salvo Launch, Scotland United, Green Party hopefully will stand as Greens. Scotland United, and perhaps room for some independent voices out with party politics who could stand, like, to take one name, I've not consulted us, so please don't take this as Scotland United ticket, because the idea would be to maximise not just the number of seats, not just the number of votes, and the idea would be to make the election about the issue 12. After I signed the Edinburgh Agreement with David Cameron, my first job then was to unite everybody under the independence banner. And therefore we had a launch meeting which I think we had to extend the time scale because of the number of speakers, because we were anxious, I was anxious to make sure we got everybody into the broad tent supporting independence. And when that started to flourish, it took a wee bit longer than I hoped for it to flourish in 2014. But then you saw the effect it had in sweeping the country and lifting the yes support by 10, 15 points in the polls as we move towards the referendum day. People like the idea of people who believe in independence coming together and arguing the essential case and not just grinding their party political axis. This is an election. If it is to be a genuine plebiscite election, which is more important than the future and fate of any party or any candidate, it's about the future and fate of the country itself. So the other party will be positively contributing these ideas, and hopefully as we go around the meetings like this, consolidating the independence case. And that brings me to the last point I want to make this evening, and that's the key importance of these meetings and of this book, and I'm told of the successor book which may be coming out with bigger typeface in the autumn. I think the last of the 100,000 of these have been delivered over this weekend, and we're going to order a new edition for the autumn, and that's an amazing effort. 100,000 of these books is no mean feat, and it's written in a conversational style that leads people through the arguments which they effectively haven't really heard since the referendum campaign, because the world has changed fundamentally since 2014. We've had a pandemic, we've got a European war, Brexit has happened. These are huge changes, and the impact on the case for independence. Some people think, oh my goodness, it makes it much more difficult. No, it doesn't. It just beholds those arguing for independence to bring the case up to date, a case for 2020, not the and probably the most important, and that is the fact that Brexit has happened. What happened in the referendum, when of course no campaign said you vote yes and you'll be out of the European Union. That Ruth Davison was absolutely positive about it. A year, and lo and behold, we didn't vote yes and we ended up out of the European Union. People are angry that that is not seen as a fundamental if, for example, Scotland is dragged out of the European Union and the people of Scotland so wish in favour of Brexit at that time, but going, given the way the Tories were going, but I didn't expect it to happen. But nonetheless, it was. I think the BBC probably got a shock last week in Question Time, I don't know if you saw it, about the reservoir of anger that's something that people in Scotland voted is being to be a student of politics, to feel a welling anger about that, and the Unionist parties underrate that, and they underrate it fundamentally. It's one of the great engines as to why there is growth and why the independence case is at 50% as opposed to the whatever 30% or so as it was in 2012 when I signed the Edinburgh case for independence. Very obvious point that a nation, any self-respecting nation, should be able to choose whether it's part of Europe or not. But of course it poses questions for independence as well, and questions that the Unionists will be very happy to fling in Scotland. They're almost right to talk about it. Issues like customs posts, issues like how will you get into the European Union, how long will it take? The importance of books like this, we argue that you shouldn't. You should accept that it takes 5 years to get back to the European Union. Michel Barnier was the negotiator for Europe in the Brexit negotiations, and like most Frenchmen, I suspect, I think Scotland's a great place, probably likes bagpipe music, and loves the idea of Scotland, right? It would be fairly typical. After a while, we would go through the same process as everybody else, and it would take perhaps 5 years. Now think of that. Independence for the Westminster government. That causes a problem. We'd be negotiating from limbo. Does that mean we should have an organisation called EFTA, the European Free Trade Association? The EFTA can't be too bad a place because it's 4 member countries, that is Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, Luxembourg. The biggest advantage of EFTA as far as our current position is concerned is you can join EFTA in 3 months. No 5 years. And when you join EFTA, you inherit EFTA's treaties with the rest of the world, with the European Union, and indeed with the United Kingdom. And that would be the position for the Scottish people. You would fix the economics and then let the politics take care of itself. Why is that particularly important just now? Because we actually have a proximate example negotiations said there will be an administrative border in the Irish Sea. Now, the Unionist parties, and particularly the Democrat unions, don't like it much, but a majority of the Northern Irish Assembly, as elected, approve of it. Why do they approve of it? A relatively minor inconvenience there is from an administrative border, it's more than matched by the boom in trade with then there would be no question whatsoever. And that's approximately the status that Scotland would have if, as an independent country, we were something which is going to have potentially massive as has already been demonstrated. So here's route, they're putting their slogans in a bus, crossing the final and hoping for the best. The worked out, articulated, positive case for Scottish independence, updated into the modern world. The more chaos in Westminster, the better Scotland's opportunity to press its case on self-determination. Scotland as well. This is the moment to press our case when our opponents are weak. And second, in progressing the case for national freedom, on the strength of the case that Scotland is benefits of an independent Scotland, outgoing, pluralist in this modern world. Thank you very much.
We're going to move to questions. The Salvo group would like to give you a gift, if we might. Small thing. And by a group working right here in St Andrews University under Professor Keith Brown. Line with some help from Sterling. Backward, socially, politically undeveloped country, as indeed they did. So what we've done, or I've done, is translated that into Scots. So copy.
Do I get the whiskey as well? But,
Sadly, no. Neither do we.
you won't be able to read it from there, but nonetheless, it's beautiful.
On the basis that no parliamentary party has ever won a majority vote in any election, is it not a bad idea to set the bar at a majority of votes?
The question all comes down to election, then it's a single question. You possibly can. And what you can't do is two things. Squabble about by all means, everybody should. The type of independence. And what you also don't want to do is to bog the arguments about independence down with the day-to-day machinations of government that is in power and the risks that that would introduce to the discussion and debate. Because what you're articulating when you're fighting vision, a different future, talking about in a normal general election is what you're going to get for the next 5 years. To be absolutely crystal clear about what we would be asking the people of Scotland to make a decision on, and that has to be, should Scotland be
and just to make sure that there's time for everybody, I'm going to try and choose the most, I hope, Sandy G. Your other questions. I don't know where you are, but I hope that's all right. This seems like an interesting or problems you can see
highness of that hurdle that's been set, and it is it's a very, very high hurdle indeed. A majority of the vote, not majority of the seat. Some people say it goes to Victoria. 8% was got by the Liberal Union. They were in alliance with another political party, a hangover from the national government, the coalition government team. In fact, the next Secretary of State for Scotland was a Liberal Unionist as opposed to a Conservative as such. And then you have to do your best to meet it, and you have to into the eye. The way to do that is to gather all the independent forces and have them contributing with their own different points of view, obviously. That the independent forces are united, trying to do something, whereas the unionist forces are divided and scrambling over who's going to. So everybody was backing up everybody else. In other words, what we did in a referendum in 2014, you try and replicate in a general election. That's the way it could and indeed should be done. You know, however, it's not good described in the vast majority of SNP. The seats will be fought by SNP sitting MPs, and they will fight as SNP Scotland United. Similarly with Neil and Kenny as our Scotland. In terms of how you accommodated all the forces you wanted behind that banner. Now that would be the way to do it. Whether that, I can't promise that's what will be done, or I can promise it's Alipper positively will advocate for that from Westminster. I have all these mandates, all that effort from the people. No, that's it then. I mean, you try effort to change their minds. I don't think the situation in Westminster is going to get any more stable. I think the party are riven with all sorts and that crisis is going to deepen. That's how we have to prepare ourselves and the people for. But you know, folk aren't daft. They know that the absolute genesis of the price pressure afflicting every family in the country at the present moment is soaring fuel. Scotland has green energy. In fact, we've got enough offshore wind to power Scotland 10 times over at half the proposing to invest in.
Yeah.
Now, these are not difficult arguments to get across. And at the heart of the argument and the heart of the economic crisis, we'll be able to say to people in Scotland, look, why fuel poverty?
Yeah.
And the reality with a constitutional ambition. So it's not without possibilities, but I'm certain to maximise it.
Before the next question, I have a couple of things that I should remedy. By saying that, so far as I'm concerned, he, along with the redoubtable Kenny McCaskill, have been the two pro-Indy MPs managed to embarrass the Westminster government when they needed to be embarrassed, and of course that is Neil Hanby. Answer, but
read the question. If it's
and it was a nice, easy one.
then I'll
And she adds, what could they be scared of?
Anyway, I kind of think it's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it's really that important. As far as I'm interested in those data it is not really what's important at the moment. And Alec touched on something that I think is a really the anger and frustration we were promised wouldn't materialise have materialised, and so we're quite of not just and the cost of living crisis, as it's called. It will soon become a catastrophe. It already is for many. Absolute indefensible position, hungry, unable to heat their homes, unable to feed their wains, watching investment in nuclear weapons on the west of Scotland. We have to take that enormous outpouring of feeling that is going to happen, and we have to campaign for independence. We can't wait. I've said this so many times now. We can't wait for the must all as individuals campaign for independence. I've been involved in this this campaign since I joined the SNP in 20. History that Alec has, but I have certainly have the continuing passion to see it delivered. So I'm not interested in Tory polls. I'm interested in convincing Scottish people. I'm interested in listening to their to build the message and to take that case forward. And I'm certainly much more interested in challenging the UK responsibility to recognise Scotland's democratic mandate for a further independence vote.
SNP leadership through the ideas that Alec
and see what happens to them. I mean, I gave the example of the plebiscite election. I mean, I remember Councillor McElhenney getting booed in the stage when he mentioned Plan B. Angus McNeill getting shunned, Joe Cherry getting victimised because they wouldn't toe the line. Now, of course, the people who were booing them and attacking them are now saying, well, what if I come a flattery? So let's find out the idea. Well, I'd say this now, if the SNP Parliamentary group want to know how to play Parnell to Westminster, then I would advise them to take on as a special assistant, because they've got many and terms of staff is. I've always seen eye to eye. I'll tell you what, if it comes to finding ways to play Parnell in the Westminster look, people have to bring forward ideas and then have to do. The SNP or Alec weren't elected on an abstentionist platform. Therefore, it wouldn't be right, even if it was 1918 election in Ireland. For example, Sinn Féin were absolutely clear, we're not going to Westminster, we're setting up the door there. That doesn't stop you, for example, setting up the Scottish Convention on a Friday in Edinburgh. I mean, if there's queasy about using the current Parliament building, I don't see why not, because the Festival of Politics is in there, but nonetheless, Scotland, comprising the MPs and the MSPs on a Friday, bring in the local authorities.
Yes.
And make declarations that we want this referendum.
Yeah.
And there'll be a dramatic amount of publicity accompanying that initiative. And you could, all it means, for goodness sake, it's a Friday. It's a bit extra. Prevention of direct action of constitutional innovation wasn't successful, and we went to a plebiscite election. The day after the plebiscite election, Westminster is still not going to say, well done chaps, you've won.
No, not ever.
Cricket, whenever it's your turn to bat. That's plebiscite election if you win it. As you galvanise Scottish opinion, you highlight, and the importance of this should not be underestimated. Theoretically, and in terms of their words, even Margaret Thatcher, Downing Street years, I'm an English politician, Scotland is a proud nation, and if the Scottish people were ever to determine under independence, then I, for one, would not stand in their way. I might be less keen if in the 1987 election the SNP had swept the country, no doubt, but that was the position. Never thought we'd come to pass. But nonetheless, that was the route by which Scotland could exit this voluntary union if the Scottish people so chose. When I became First Minister, I navigated in 1997 in the Parliamentary debates of how we could organise a referendum to test opinion, and everybody would accept it through the Section 30. That was to give practical effect to the aspirations of the past. That was Scotland's route to freedom, and that was the established route. And in the aftermath of the referendum at the next that's the route that's been established. Somehow or another, we've allowed that to slip over these past few years, which is extremely unfortunate that we have of history. The key underlying thing to these points of crisis, these moments of decision, was the innovation that those supporting Scottish nationhood were prepared to make and take. Democratically, they have to be innovative. And people have to be prepared when they are given the privilege of
This one's specifically for you, Alex, so I'll ask Neil this one. I guess should put candidates up. Is that what the...
Well, yes and no. I think as Alex set out in detail already, yes, the Scotland United, but I think there's a discussion about how that is put into effect. What we really want to see is the complete eradication of unionist parties. You think it's going to succeed? That might, in some areas, I can think of an Edinburgh seat, for example, where you might want to put somebody from Labour for Independence up, as well as some of the other more traditional parties. Votes that come maximize support for that gateway to a better Scotland. That has to be the decision.
So this question is for Alec. Why did you not say during the last referendum in the
referendum that Scotland would continue to use the pound sterling as Ireland did? I did do this. If you care to examine to stop Scotland using sterling. If we so wish, it's internationally tradable currency. However, if you read the wee out of the book, you'll see that things have moved on. And then the policy that we devised for 2014 was a union. And in that situation, it wouldn't have been to get everybody into the euro. And therefore, and of course, your major trading partner would be in the same economic arrangement as yourself. We're in a different world now. We're in a world where doesn't mean you can't use sterling. And even when your own currency is established, you can still have your assets in sterling, your house in sterling. Absolutely. Take your mortgage into sterling, you take your pension in another currency. That's what you do. So, we're in a different world. But in particular, with the law, borrowing like all countries are doing at the present moment in somebody else's currency. That's not a good idea. And therefore the correct position now, as is explained, where you missed that. It was all my idea. It's like your phone, and you get a wonderful exposition. So if you want to know about after, you flip your phone. I'm explaining why Scotland should move its own currency as quickly as possible. Yes, of course, we could use sterling as a transitional currency, as keeping assets, and as long as nobody can stop you doing that. But it would be to Scotland's advantage to develop. I'm not. My recollection of referendum currency, and I noticed Angus Robertson now in Parliament said this was the punt. The biggest mistake they made, of course, was adopting the euro. So target of currency speculators to our greatest advantage. So a period transition will be politically independent, but not economically. So take what we're saying about the European Union and so on. I think wide, they said they couldn't do so. Peru uses the American dollar. And eventually, when we're ready, we stand on feet. Because it's open to look at the BBC debate, but they didn't 1.2 million people in Scotland. And it was very, very and he eventually admitted, of course you can use the sterling. And as soon as he said that, he gave the whole game that Osborne's blackmail game away. Because while Osborne, of course, could say, quite disgracefully, with the interference of Treasury civil servants, like as they always do, he would deny a currency arrangement, a currency union, but obviously you can't. We put forward a prospectus that said, look, we should share assets and share liabilities. So we'll share the asset of the currency and the reserves, and we accept the liabilities, which is our share of UK debt. Even although the title for that debt, and this was admitted in the early part of 2014, lies in the UK Treasury. But the position of not just George Osborne, but all of the UK parties was, you're not getting the share of the assets. We're not talking about geographical assets like oil and gas or Edinburgh Castle or Holyrood Palace, incidentally, which belongs to the country. We're talking here about intangible assets, monetary assets, and reserves. So their position was, you don't get. In that circumstance, we have no obligation, none whatsoever, to accept the share of the liabilities. Because broadly speaking, the assets of the country fairly balance the liabilities, although the liabilities of late have been increasing very, very fast. And therefore that should be our position. And again, we discuss it in the Yellow book, that if in circumstances of 2022, I was going to negotiations, I'd start from a clean break settlement, let's call it that. You keep your assets and you keep your liabilities. And yes, we can use sterling as anybody across the world can, and we'll continue to be able to use it, and even after we establish our currency, we'll continue to use it for certain things, because some people want to keep their assets in sterling. That's understood. But I think we should move to our own currency as quickly as possible. That's not the day after independence or even a year after independence, but it's a quick time scale. Because when it comes to international borrowing, from that zero position, and you'll be a wonderful bet for borrowing, incidentally, because there's one or two other countries in that position, Norway and one or two others in the Middle East. There's very few countries that are approaching international markets for a clean balance sheet and stuff. So therefore, you'd be in a good position to borrow, but you want to borrow as soon as possible in your own currency, not someone else's. But listen, this is a great tribute to the economics department at St Andrews University.
Thank you for correcting my memory about the Alistair Darling interview. I totally forgot about that. That has changed my whole view of the situation. Thank you for your very articulate answer.
But the scores, we were taught generosity and open-mindedness.
Okay. So I'm going to do a kind of combined question for Neil here, and that is, does he see it as a net positive or negative that we're looking at the demise of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, if we are, and also if we when we obtain our self-determination and freedom, can you foresee a time when we would be looking at a referendum on rejoining the Union? And how long would that take?
That's one for you, Neil.
Yeah.
Go on yourself.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Alec, and thanks, Sarah. And thanks for the questioners for both of those points. I mean, Alec has addressed the first part of that in his remarks. It's a question that I've been fielding this week down in Westminster by the media. It's a question that you're seeing on the BBC and in the newspapers where, oh, you've lost your best recruiting sergeant. The reality is that it doesn't matter who the occupant of number 10 Downing Street is, as long as they hold Scotland's democracy hostage, then all they will do is drive up support for independence, and that is particularly true, as I said, in the current economic climate. And the last one I'll deal with very swiftly, which is that since 1941, when Winston Churchill signed the Atlantic Charter with the United States, and they agreed effectively to the breakup of the British Empire to allow every country to choose its own form of government and have self-determination. No country that has won its independence from the United Kingdom has ever begged to come back or ever asked for a referendum to rejoin. So, with our abundant resources, I don't anticipate that's a question we need to really give too much time to.
I think it's probably only fair now, I think there's maybe two more here, but I think it's only fair to give a tough one. How disputed, I think this contains a lot more than just the question, how disputed are the sea areas that Scotland claims from a fishing and oil gas perspective? I assume this means disputed by...
referring to a bit of chicanery in 1999. Six thousand square miles, thank you. From Scotland. So they haven't just slipped it past the SNP, they've slipped it past one of the Labour colleagues. You know, this with sort of civil servants sitting there thinking, my God, that boundary line we've got at the present moment, which went, if you remember, horizontally across the North Sea. The one thing I would say, it's redrawn minus the 6,000 square miles in a line of equidistance, which is the only oil fields left there are Argyll field, for example, have long since redundant. Fishing not that important, I mean, it's not a great fishing area. You might get a few wind turbines in that 6,000 square miles, but given that we've got the potential of 25% of the offshore wind generation, 65, maybe 70% of the UK's territorial waters, even with the redrawn boundaries, I suspect we won't revisit the 6,000 square miles from 1999. We'll just make sure that as we approach independence, there's no redrafting yet again. So, it's an example of Westminster publicity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a warning that we go through. So it's a good example from the past. It isn't particularly important in terms of the resources in the 6,000 square miles. It's more or less to call canning and watch what's happening for the future.
On a related question from Jan, she He says, considering why would the Scottish Government sell out these licences for what appears to be put your house on the market?
Yeah, John's quite right about this. The Scottish Government, for reasons best known to themselves, in the early part of this year, held the world's first reverse. If you're having a round, as we used to call them in Aberdeenshire, or you're having a flitting, as we call them in Lidgate, and you had a garage sale, as they set the highest bidder's price for selling your family heirlooms. And incidentally, the way things are going, we're all going to be thinking of selling your family heirlooms. We would start at the bottom and hope. And all these TV programmes that do this, you notice that, with that lovely lady from Glasgow who comes advising folk, and then you get the breathless excitement as they take their purchases into the auction to see if they've made a programme. But anyway, you take the highest bidder. Well, the Scottish Government, over 50 million. So if anybody offered, no, we're not accepting that. No, we'll take the 50 million, but no more. I'm amused by this, because the Smith, which was in the aftermath of the referendum, one gain was to get in the sentence, nothing in this commission will prevent the Scottish people deciding in the form of a commission. Now, the Crown Estate has been historically one of the most competent, rapacious, and toffee-nosed institutions, even in the United Kingdom, and that's saying something. And they have blackmailed and blackballed about Garston Harbour. They were wanting to charge them 25 years of back harbour. Until I found a statute of Charles II, not long after the St Andrews Parliament, the Covenanters decided to adopt Charles as their king, and as a Covenant. He really was an enthusiastic Covenanter himself. So he went on a tour of the country to try and build up an army, which met its fate at Dunbar. St Gardens, and in the morning he wrote them a royal charter saying they were exempt from crown dues. And lo and behold, I managed to get a copy of, and I was able to present it to the Crown Estate Commission, and they ran a mile. Because Garrison is exempt.
Yeah.
When they devolved it, I thought, well, that's plain sailing. That means no more threats and intimidation of wee harbours around Scotland. Communities around Scotland will get a fair share of the foreshore and the rights. And of course, Scotland, when it comes to the licensing, what the Scottish Parliament seemed to have done is to leave the same idiots in charge of the devolved institution who were in charge the world's first reverse cat auction. And instead of getting even what the English Crown Estate Commission got for the offshore wind licences, and about a fifth of what the American got for an offshore round, there are a big problem with this, isn't there? Because all of us in the independence movement, we want to say, look, independence is the chance to do things. And that, as much as Scotland's future is in that renewable, clean, green, affordable power. Not just for the income we can get from generating, but the industry we can bring to the power, as well as exporting the power elsewhere. It has been passed in reverse, but we're going to get another shock from the parent votes. Because, of course, the electricity has to be landed. Any attempt to, as is going to be done, to take it directly south can be intercepted by the planning authority if they so wish. But, again, the political will. You know, I've watched the ferry fiasco, as it's called, over the course of this year. And of course, it's pretty. But more important, is that Scotland auction. And that has to be reversed, and we have to have an absolute determination that after all of our experience over the last half-century of for reasons being capital in terms of oil and gas and hydrocarbons, the international capital and Westminster Treasury without any return. We cannot renewable and heavily lucrative resources. It has to be reversed, and we have to have an absolute determination that these assets belong to the people of Scotland who will share in the benefits.
I had one very session to what Alec has just said. So the ScotWind sale, the 700 million reverse auction, that the economic was £350 billion. That's 5.5 billion a year. We'll get about 60 to 90 million if the current projections based on the licence that have been signed ring true. So if you can imagine, that's like me saying, I'm going to pay you £90 a month for a job that's worth $5.5 grand. That's the reality.
Yeah. Thanks. So we have just about run out of time now. So I'm just going to. Okay. So there's a very quick announcement. The raffle has been drawn. The prizes are at the back of the hall. And if whoever won it, another one. You don't have to give yours back. And if you did win it, I'm quite sure that Alec would be happy to sign it for you.
Yeah.
Right. For us to do now is to say thank you to George, to Neil, And
Please.